Caitlyn Clark going at it with an assistant coach on the bench. Caitlyn was pissed.
The arena was already electric. Thousands of fans packed inside Indianapolis, screaming, chanting, completely locked into every single possession. But then something happened on the Fever bench that made even the most seasoned WNBA observers stop dead in their tracks and immediately rewind the footage. Cameras caught Caitlyn Clark walking past Stephanie White after what appeared to be yet another heated sideline exchange. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, no smile. Just a cold, deliberate brush past that sent shockwaves through every corner of social media within minutes of the clip surfacing online. Fans erupted instantly with one burning question echoing across every platform simultaneously. Was this the moment Caitlyn Clark finally reached her breaking point? Because this didn't look like a routine disagreement between a young player and her coaching staff anymore. This looked deeply personal. This looked like weeks of built-up frustration finally breaking through the surface in a way that could no longer be hidden behind post-game talking points and diplomatic press conference answers. And if you've been watching the Indiana Fever closely this season, you already know this tension didn't appear out of nowhere. The signs have been building quietly in the background for weeks, visible in body language, in sideline reactions, in the subtle moments between plays that cameras catch when nobody realizes they're still rolling. Let's go back to exactly what people saw, because the details matter more than the headlines suggest. Caitlyn had just hit a massive shot, the kind of shot that shifts momentum entirely and sends an entire arena into a frenzy. She was walking toward the bench, adrenaline clearly pumping, emotion written all over her face. She gave quick high fives to a couple of teammates, the natural celebration you'd expect from any competitor in that moment. But when she reached the area where Stephanie White was standing, something noticeably different happened. There was no warm exchange, no shared celebration, no coach-player connection that you'd typically expect after a huge momentum swing. Instead, Caitlyn appeared to move past White almost deliberately, her body language radiating a kind of controlled frustration that told an entire story without a single word being spoken. People watching the broadcast noticed it immediately. Fans in the building noticed it. And within hours, the clip had spread across every major basketball platform online, generating millions of views and sparking one of the most intense debates the WNBA community has seen in recent memory. The internet split almost immediately into two distinct camps. One group saw a passionate, elite competitor who is tired of feeling restricted and is finally letting that frustration show in visible, undeniable ways. The other group saw early warning signs of a locker room situation that could spiral into something much more damaging if Indiana's front office doesn't intervene quickly. But regardless of which side you fall on, one thing became absolutely impossible to deny after that moment. The relationship between Caitlyn Clark and her coaching staff is under serious strain, and it's no longer something that can be quietly swept under the rug. Here's what makes this situation so complicated and so compelling at the same time. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was the latest and most visible flashpoint in a pattern that fans have been documenting, analyzing, and debating for several weeks now. Watch the sideline footage from recent Fever games carefully, and you'll start noticing things that casual viewers might miss entirely. There are repeated moments during timeouts where Caitlyn is passionately explaining something, gesturing toward the floor, clearly trying to communicate what she's seeing from her perspective on the court. And in multiple instances, coaches appear to be talking over her before she's finished making her point. The expression on her face during these moments is telling. It's not the expression of a player who feels heard. It's the expression of a player who is starting to wonder whether her voice carries any real weight in these conversations. There are also moments where Caitlyn gets the crowd going, celebrating a huge play, feeding off the energy of the building, doing exactly what great players do when momentum is turning in their favor. And in several of these instances, cameras have caught someone on the bench stepping in almost immediately, grabbing her arm, pulling her aside, seemingly trying to settle the emotion rather than let it build naturally. Fans have watched this happen repeatedly, and the reaction online has been fierce every single time. Because that competitive fire, that raw emotional intensity that Caitlyn brings to every game, is a significant part of what makes her so special. It's part of what has drawn millions of new fans into women's basketball who had never seriously watched the sport before she arrived. When you start managing that energy rather than channeling it, you risk dulling the very thing that makes your most important player magnetic. Beyond the sideline interactions, fans started noticing something else during recent games that poured additional fuel onto an already intense debate: the substitution timing. Multiple times throughout games where Caitlyn was clearly heating up and the crowd was building energy around her momentum, she would suddenly find herself headed to the bench. The arena would be rising, she'd hit a deep three or create a spectacular assist opportunity. The energy in the building would be peaking, and then almost without fail, she'd come out of the game. Now, substitution decisions in professional basketball are complex. Coaches balance minutes, foul trouble, defensive matchups, fatigue, and 100 other variables that fans watching from the stands or at home can't fully see or account for. That's a fair and important point to acknowledge. But here's what makes the fan reaction so understandable in this specific case. The statistical reality of what Indiana looks like with Caitlyn on the floor versus what they look like when she's resting is not a subtle or debatable difference. It's dramatic. The pace changes. The ball movement accelerates. Transition opportunities multiply. Defenses that looked comfortable suddenly start scrambling. The entire offensive identity of the team transforms when she's allowed to play freely and control tempo. And during stretches where she's on the bench, Indiana has been getting outscored in ways that have become difficult for even the most balanced analysts to ignore. So when fans see her heating up and immediately coming out of the game, the frustration is understandable even if the full context of those decisions isn't entirely visible from the outside. To truly understand why this situation feels so urgent and why fans are reacting with such intensity, you have to step back and look at the bigger picture of what Caitlyn Clark actually represents for women's basketball right now. This is not an ordinary rookie to second-year player transition story. This is not a normal case of a young talent learning to fit into an existing system. The scale of what has happened around Caitlyn Clark since she entered the WNBA is genuinely unprecedented in the history of women's professional sports in America. Arenas that hadn't seen sellout crowds in years are now turning people away. Television ratings have jumped to levels that made network executives look twice and immediately start renegotiating broadcast deals. Merchandise sales, social media engagement, national media attention, and general public awareness of the WNBA have all reached heights that the league had spent years trying to achieve before Caitlyn arrived and accomplished it seemingly overnight. She has done something that transcends basketball statistics or individual accolades. She has made people who had never watched a WNBA game in their lives become dedicated, passionate fans of the sport. That kind of impact is extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily valuable, which is exactly why the current situation in Indiana feels so alarming to so many people who care about what happens next for women's basketball. Because right now, instead of the conversation being about Caitlyn Clark's brilliance and the Fever's continued growth as a franchise, the dominant narrative keeps circling back to sideline tension, substitution debates, and visible disconnects between Indiana's biggest star and the coaching staff responsible for putting her in the best position to succeed. That's a problem, and it goes well beyond any single game result. There's an important perspective worth adding to this conversation, because some of the criticism being directed at Caitlyn for showing visible frustration genuinely misses the point about what elite competitors are actually like behind the scenes and often right on camera. Go watch footage of Michael Jordan arguing with Phil Jackson during timeouts. Watch Kobe Bryant challenging coaching decisions on the bench with visible anger and intensity. Watch how competitive fire manifests in players like Russell Westbrook, Draymond Green, or Brittany Griner when they feel something isn't working the right way. Elite competitors argue. Elite competitors demand better. Elite competitors push back when they believe they understand something their coaches might be missing in a given moment. That's not toxicity. That's the relentless pursuit of winning that separates generational talents from ordinary players. The question that actually matters isn't whether Caitlyn is showing emotion and frustration. Of course she is. She's a hyper-competitive superstar who wants to win every single night and believes deeply in her understanding of the game. The real question is whether the people around her are listening to what that frustration is trying to communicate. Because if a player of Caitlyn Clark's caliber is repeatedly and visibly frustrated with how a system is being run, that's information. That's valuable feedback from the most important player on your roster. And great coaches find ways to use that feedback rather than simply trying to manage it into silence. One of the most emotionally charged threads running through this entire debate involves a perceived double standard in how Caitlyn Clark's emotions and celebrations are treated compared to how similar behavior from other stars across basketball is received. When male superstars scream after a big play, flex for the crowd, get into heated conversations with coaches, or show obvious emotional intensity during competition, the reaction is almost universally positive. That's him being a leader. That's his competitive fire. That's what makes him special. But multiple times this season when Caitlyn Clark has celebrated huge plays, fired up the crowd, or shown visible frustration during difficult moments, the reaction from certain corners has been notably different. Suddenly, the conversation shifts to whether she's being too emotional, whether she's creating problems in the locker room, whether her behavior is appropriate. Fans who have followed her journey closely find this double standard genuinely infuriating. And honestly, it's hard to argue that their frustration is entirely without merit. The fire, the swagger, the emotional leadership, the ability to ignite a building and make an entire arena rise to its feet, these aren't side effects of Caitlyn Clark's greatness. They are core components of what makes her so compelling and so effective. When someone consistently tries to dial that down rather than channel it, they're working against the very qualities that make her so valuable. Here's where things get genuinely concerning for anyone who wants to see Indiana succeed and wants to see Caitlyn Clark reach her full potential within this franchise. Superstars have a breaking point. It's not a personal failing or a character flaw. It's simply human reality. There is a threshold beyond which even the most resilient, professionally mature competitor starts to emotionally disconnect from the environment around them. Early last season, fans noticed Caitlyn handling frustrations with remarkable grace. She'd smile through difficult moments. She'd stay patient during stretches where things weren't going her way. She'd push through adversity without letting it seep visibly into her body language or relationships with coaches. But watch her recent interactions carefully and compare them to that early footage. The patience that was so visible in those first months looks significantly diminished right now. The ease with which she could laugh off difficult moments has been replaced by something harder and more guarded. When a superstar of this magnitude starts emotionally distancing herself from the coaching staff around her, it rarely stays contained to sideline interactions. It starts affecting communication in film sessions. It affects how freely players share what they're seeing on the floor. It creates invisible walls that gradually make a team less functional even when the statistics don't yet fully reflect the internal friction. Indiana needs to recognize the warning signs here and respond to them proactively, rather than waiting for the situation to escalate to a point where it becomes genuinely difficult to repair. The path forward for the Indiana Fever isn't particularly complicated when you look at it honestly, though it may require some difficult internal conversations and real institutional humility. First, the coaching staff needs to create genuine space for Caitlyn Clark's basketball intelligence to be part of the conversation. Not performatively, not in a way where she's allowed to speak but ultimately ignored, but in a real and substantive way. She sees the game at an elite level. The things she's passionately trying to communicate during those sideline exchanges deserve to be seriously heard and genuinely considered. Second, Indiana needs to stop managing her emotions and start channeling them. The fire she brings, the way she ignites arenas and creates energy that radiates through an entire building, is an asset, a profound one. The instinct to contain it is understandable from a traditional coaching perspective, but it's ultimately working against what makes this player transcendent. Third, and most importantly, the franchise needs to make absolutely clear both through private conversations and through the decisions visible on the court that Caitlyn Clark is the undisputed centerpiece of everything they are building. She should feel that in how the offense is designed. She should feel it in how her minutes are managed. She should feel it in how her perspective is valued. Because right now, far too many outside observers are questioning whether she actually feels that way. Here's the bottom line about everything happening in Indiana right now, and it needs to be stated clearly. Caitlyn Clark is producing extraordinary basketball despite operating in what appears to be a genuinely difficult environment. She's dropping massive stat lines, creating plays the WNBA has never seen before, and doing it all while simultaneously carrying the weight of historic expectations and fighting battles that seem to extend far beyond what happens between the lines. The fact that she is still performing at an elite level under these circumstances says everything you need to know about her character and her competitive drive. But here's what should genuinely worry Indiana fans and WNBA supporters everywhere. If Caitlyn Clark is doing this while still feeling restricted, still feeling like her voice isn't fully valued, still navigating visible friction with the coaching staff around her, the question becomes almost terrifying to contemplate. What would she look like if the system was completely built around her strengths? What would she look like if she walked into every game feeling fully trusted, fully empowered, and completely aligned with the people coaching her. What would the Indiana Fever look like if the organization committed entirely and without reservation to unleashing everything she's capable of? The gap between what we're currently seeing and what she might actually be capable of in the right environment represents one of the most compelling storylines in women's basketball today. That moment where she walked past Stephanie White without acknowledgement wasn't just a viral sideline clip. It was a message. And the Indiana Fever organization needs to decide very quickly whether they're willing to genuinely hear it before the distance between their franchise cornerstone and the people around her becomes something much harder to close. Because women's basketball has never had a moment like Caitlyn Clark before. And the worst possible outcome for everyone who loves this sport would be watching that moment be wasted by an organization that couldn't figure out how to get out of its own way. Drop your opinion below. Do you think Caitlyn Clark is being held back by the Indiana Fever coaching staff? Or is this just the pressure that comes with being the biggest star in women's basketball? Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss breaking Caitlyn Clark and WNBA coverage the moment it drops.